Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Beard podcast. Today we're going to be journeying back into Middle-earth. We're going to be hitting another Lord of the Rings character, something I'm very fond of. But today's character is very special. Not only does he wield magic, but he's got a killer beard. So stick around and we'll get to talking about this next masculine character.
On this island, you'll not find love. Only sleepless nights. I'm just a ghost of the man I was, too weary to fight.
Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Beard podcast, a podcast dedicated to discovering true masculinity. Today, we are diving into another fictional character, another great man. But before we get going, guys, how's everybody doing?
I would say pretty good. I got back-to-back snow days.
Yeah, you jerk.
Basically the Patriots of snow days. It was fantastic. Dude, it was so nice. Oh my gosh. And they called it the night before pretty much every time.
Which I appreciate because
so much.
Well, it's your teacher, so I get that why you would appreciate that. It's nice for parents, and Mike, maybe you can back me up on this, but it's like, oh, cool. I'm not going to have childcare for tomorrow, so I at least have 8 hours to try and figure something out. Not 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh crap. Shoot. What am I doing? So I appreciated that.
No, I loved it, man. Did 3 days worth of sledding, built a little igloo in the backyard with my kids. That was fun.
Nice.
And did a lot of just diving into my hobbies for 3 days because we were stuck inside. So yeah, it was nice though. It was really nice. Got to paint my first tank, which was awesome. That was pretty cool. Yeah, a little tiger tank. Tim's one of the guys who plays board games with me, so I run some tabletop role playing games. So you got a boss fight coming up here.
Yeah, it'll be fun whenever we get to that. I think it's like a year in the making.
Oh, dude, it's like 5 years in the making. Don't even get me started.
Mike, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. I'm tired.
Yeah,
as always, trying to fix the other computer. So
yeah, the ongoing
technical difficulties.
Yeah. The challenges of life, huh?
Maybe someday we'll make enough money off this podcast. We can just buy you a really nice.
I can buy the computer. It's not that because that one's about 10 years old at least. It's it's a matter of troubleshooting and figuring out what exactly is going wrong. And so I'm not just building an entire new rig and then all of a sudden still having a problem.
Bunch of trial and error.
Well, because right? Because if you're building a new rig, that's $1,000 or more,
depending on the hardware I put in.
Exactly.
Yeah. But a lot of the things like it has certain drives that would get shifted over to that one anyway.
Right.
And so if one of those drives is what is failing,
right,
the build would be worthless essentially.
That's true.
It would not resolve the problem. It wouldn't be worthless, but it would not resolve the issues I'm currently facing.
Tim, how about you? How you doing?
Good, man. I was in Houston this week, which was
nice.
Weird. Kind of. Well, it was super weird because in Colorado we were getting a whole bunch of snow. And then I went to Houston on Monday night, so we had just started getting snow, and so all the kids are on snow days. My poor wife was having to figure that out on her own, which was tough. But and then I was in Houston, and it was like 85 and humid and sunny, and it was good, man. I got to have some good meetings, and it was good. Got to have. By the way, guys, if you guys are ever in the Houston area, I would like to recommend Lupe Tortilla.
Lupe Tortilla.
Yeah, Lupe Tortilla. We are not sponsored by them. However, if they wanted to, we would happily endorse Lupe Tortilla.
If you can get any sort of Mexican food to sponsor us, I'm down with it. I'd be totally down with it.
And honestly, their tortillas were absolutely fantastic. The meat was so good. They're some of the best tacos I've ever had.
Dang.
So
okay, man,
it was good. It was good. I recommend 10 out of 10 recommend. It's good. So we hope you guys are having a good week. But we want to get started. So Matt, who are we talking about tonight?
So we've gone through two characters so far. Yep. We've talked about Aragorn and Faramir in the world of men, which of course I think a lot of us identify with, right? The human characters in Tolkien.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I mean, and Aragorn is, Númenorian, so he's a little special there, right? But we tend to identify a little bit with the humans, especially because of their flaws and stuff like that. But today we're talking about a very different character, a character who I think needs very little to no introduction. Sure. And that, of course, is the character that is rocking possibly the greatest beard in all of Middle-earth. And that would be, of course, Gandalf. By the way, I still submit that whenever somebody comes on our show to do an interview and doesn't have a beard, we got to get a fake wizard's beard.
Yeah, we
You know how
really
epic
do.
That would be? Oh man, we got to do that.
I feel like there's an opportunity that we're missing for sure.
I agree. I think that'd be fantastic. But yeah. Anyways, if you don't know about Lord of the Rings, you haven't read it, anything like that, like Mike over here, I still think people know the name Gandalf. It's almost like one of those names that almost everybody knows, right?
It's like Merlin.
And, yeah. And I mean, he's probably one of the top 3 most famous wizards of all time. You could put Merlin in there, Gandalf, maybe Dumbledore, right?
Yeah, Dumbledore.
Harry Potter was a wizard. You can put him in there too.
Was he really though? Like,
yes, he was. But he didn't have the beard
You're
yet.
a
That's the
wizard,
problem. If we're
That
talking
whole
about
line,
he's what?
the who's the guy?
Hagrid.
Hagrid. There you go.
Yeah.
Big
So
guy.
he's a
Big guy. He says
wizard,
you're a
but
wizard,
he
Harry.
doesn't have the
Oh, yeah.
beard, and so it's not as epic. Like true wizards have a giant beard they have to like tuck into their belt because it's so long. But yeah, I kind of I chose this character for one specific reason. We've been for those of you who haven't followed, or maybe that you have, the whole purpose behind us studying these, fictional characters is to give us ideals to live up to. We talked about this idea with I think we had a conversation about Vince Lombardi one time, and we were talking about how the goal was we pursue perfection, knowing full well we won't obtain it, right? And so the idea is that we still have that standard, though. We have something to aim for, and that's what these fictional men give us. And so with Gandalf, number 1, awesome beard, right? Absolutely awesome beard. Number 2 would be just, there's a quote in here that I think really spoke to me as a man. And so I wanted to share that quote with you guys today after we talk a little bit about the character. So with that being said, do you guys know much about Gandalf at all? Yeah. What do you know, Tim?
He's gray.
Other than what I said, he's gray. Sometimes.
He was gray. He is now white.
I've seen the memes.
May have died, may not have died, may have come back.
He died.
Yeah.
Came back. Yeah.
Serves as kind of the symbol for like wisdom and guidance throughout Lord of the Rings.
Interesting.
That's at least my take on it.
Yeah, wisdom and guidance.
Yeah, because that's the character he plays.
Yeah,
at least the way I see it. So, what else? He has a great fight with Sauron.
Sauron or
Saruman. Sorry,
there you go. Yeah, don't worry. Naming only Tolkien can get away with naming like characters.
Yeah, Sauron,
Sauron and Saruman.
Yeah, Saruman. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a great,
which that doesn't actually happen in the book. But it's so
in
epic
the
in the movie.
Yeah, but
I fully embrace that change, by the way. I'm totally okay with that.
Listen,
I like to think Tolkien's okay with it.
I'm kind of melding the cinema and the books together because they're kind of all part of the same lore. So,
So are you including the Amazon Prime show?
No, that
it's funny that you say that because, dude, I have a buddy who is he probably is as hardcore, if not more hardcore.
He's probably more hardcore than me because I don't speak Elvish. Does he speak Elvish?
He might. I'm not even joking.
Does he like it? Does he like Rings of Power?
He actually he didn't like the first season.
Okay.
Got through it. He really likes the second season, and he has some really and he's like, I can't tell if these guys are just super nerds and are so nerdy that some of it they don't know how to make it come across well, or if they're taking some of these liberties. But anyway, he says that based on oh my gosh, I always butcher the name, the Silmarillion. That's what it is. Yeah. He said they actually do a pretty good job on the lore.
I would like to talk with him.
I'm so glad I was not tight on Tim for that shot.
Yeah, no, it's
I would like to discuss with him because I mean, we're going to talk about one blatant massive error they put in involving Gandalf because Gandalf can't be involved in the Rings of Power series.
Okay. Anyway, well, that's neither here nor there. Anyway, that's what I know about him. Yeah, he serves as an awesome character throughout all 3 books.
Yep, and technically 4 because we have
right.
The
Oh
Hobbit,
yeah,
right?
The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Mike, what about you?
I just went tight on you, and then you throw it to me.
I'm just curious, dude. Because Mike hasn't read the books. You've seen the movies. So you know a bit about the characters.
In high school, we were supposed to read. No, I read The Hobbit because that was in 5th grade. So I did read The Hobbit.
That's the best one, by the way.
Yeah, it is. I never read The Lord of the Rings because by the time I got to high school, I was like, if I don't want to read the book, I can easily get A's without it. So I didn't read the books.
It's just the saddest thing ever.
It is. I had more important things to do at the time.
I'm so sad for you right now.
I think, I don't know. I've seen the memes of Gandalf. That's about what I know. I've seen the movies.
So memes and movies.
I've got my own views on like the magic system in Lord of the Rings and how I don't like it when fictional worlds have a soft magic system. And so it makes it like,
okay, explain.
So there's soft and hard. So there's hard magic has
we're going to nerd out for just 2 seconds.
Yeah.
There is a hard magic system and a soft magic system.
Okay.
Soft magic systems are where there are not clearly defined rules or limitations on what the magic can or cannot do or why.
Okay.
Then a hard magic system is the exact opposite.
Brandon Sanderson is hard magic.
There are limitations, there's rules,
Which
and you
love.
will understand why and where and when they can do a thing.
Yeah.
I think it depends on, because I think either one can be pretty good, but
yeah, and my personality type,
definitely. I mean, your personality, you would hate the soft because you love.
So I watch. I'm like, let me get this straight. Homie could hold off a Balrog on a friggin' bridge and survive all that crap, but then you can't help out with some orcs or something like that. There's just too many areas where I'm like, how strong are you? Because you should be pulling out a serious can of kick butt right now, and you're not doing anything. It just seems seems weird.
We will discuss that a little bit, because it is. I mean, Tolkien definitely does bring that up to an extent, and so
he's not
will
powerful.
Talk
he's
that.
like,
why? Well, he is powerful, but
create a magical hack. We need the story to go on. The director decided that the movie would have been cooler. I mean, like, what's the reason?
But really,
and that's why I said we'll get into that.
Here's the thing, though. I'll just make this point really quick. Magic is not the point of the Lord of the Rings.
Negative.
Yeah.
Like in Sanderson, in Rothfuss, in a lot, right? Like the magic is the engine that's driving a lot of stuff, and that's what makes it interesting. Some of it, right?
I would agree, and I would say that's why I'm not an author.
And you also have to think too, like when Tolkien wrote all this stuff. I mean, fantasy wasn't nearly what it is now.
Well, he made it. Like, yeah, I mean, 100%. Other than like Sir George and the Green Dragon, or Sir George and the Dragon, and then the Green Knight.
Yeah,
there's a few. I mean, Beowulf, things like that. He drew upon, but it wasn't. Yeah. I mean, he made. I mean, the reason why we have orcs and elves and everything and dwarves is because of Tolkien. So, but on getting us back on track, I want to hit one thing real quick. As we're looking at this character, we want to look at it through the point of view of masculinity and looking for what we can draw upon to become better men.
Yep.
And so I also want to reintroduce our touchstone for what we think masculinity is. I love Mike's face every time I say that. He was, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, no. But our first attempt at a definition was strength wielded with control in service to God and in defense of the true, beautiful, and good. Mm-hmm. And so as we go through this, I think looking at this character from that point of view of that touchstone and of those different words that we picked out that describe masculinity, try to pick out what we see in him and then what we can aspire to be.
Sure.
Before we jump into the quote that I have for you guys, because again, we always do one major quote and we kind of discuss what we see about that character and about his masculinity from that one quote. But before we do that, I do want to talk a little bit about the character for those of you who are actually unfamiliar. And we're going to dive into some, this is where I get to nerd out now. We do get to dive into the Silmarillion just a little bit because to understand Gandalf, you have to understand where he comes from and what he really actually is. Okay. And so the Lord of the Rings world, if you read the Silmarillion, the world is created through music. So Eru Ilúvatar is like the god of gods, right? He is like God the Father, right? As more Christian viewpoint, right?
He's Zeus, he's
even higher than that. He would be like above that. Yeah. Okay. So Eru Ilúvatar sings into existence the Valar and the Maiar. The Valar are sort of like these 14, basically what you would call gods, right? And he sings them into existence to help him sing in the world of Arda, which is the world in which Middle-earth is on. Does that make sense yet?
Okay.
When they start singing it into existence, one of the Valar, named Melkor, begins to sing out his own song, which is called the Discord, which would be like, if you think of a symphony, they're all playing in unison, and then like the violin player pulls out a banjo and starts strumming on it.
Right.
Like it would just, sorry to banjo fans out there, I just picture that, and I just think that's hilarious.
Or they start playing like AC/DC or something like that.
Yeah, it's totally off, right? Okay. And so he sings in evil, basically, in discord into the world.
Okay.
And eventually, like, conceals himself in darkness and kind of broods on it, and then eventually
I wonder who that could be.
Yeah, right. He eventually becomes a character named, they rename him Morgoth, who is, of course, the big bad of everything. He's not even really mentioned in the Lord of the Rings, except for, I think they mentioned the Balrog of Morgoth. and we'll talk about that. But Balrog is, or Morgoth is the big bad of the Lord, kind of like Satan, right?
Okay, so there are now 13 Valar, and then there's Morgoth.
Yeah, and then there's Melkor. Yeah. In order to help the Valar, in order to help create the world, Iro Ilúvatar also creates another group called the Maiar, or the Maya, right? And those are primordial spirits who are there to help the Valar. That is who Gandalf really is. His true name is Olorin, and he is one of the Maiar. In fact, all of the Balrogs are also fallen Maiar who are seduced by the power of Morgoth, and that's why
where
he
the
Balrogs
fight the Balrog.
There is also another Maya. Maya. I think Maya is the singular. Maiar is plural. Yeah.
Not to be confused with Mayan.
Yeah. No. Our world.
I know the Mayans.
No, please no. But yeah. Anyways, there's another one who eventually becomes named Sauron, and so Sauron is a Maya as well. Yeah. So he and Gandalf and all the Balrogs are all like these primordial spirits initially, right?
Interesting.
And so Olorin, who is eventually named Gandalf, he spends most of his time hanging out with 2 or 3 particular Valar, and he spends his time walking unseen among the elves, learning about them, and he cares for them. He tries to like impart to them wisdom, which he learns from the Valar that he is spending time with, right? Now, for those of you that don't know how Lord of the Rings actually works and where this is even coming from, the first age is there's like the creation of everything. The first age is called, or I wouldn't call it something, but it involves something called the War of Wrath, where the elves commit themselves to try to kill and destroy Morgoth, because he steals from them these things called the Silmarils, which are these gems that contain what's left over of the light of the world. So there are 2 trees that give light to the world. They are destroyed by Morgoth, and their light had been captured previously by this elven smith, who puts them into these gems. Morgoth kills him, takes those gems, so now they're the only things that contain that light.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So they declare war on him and chase him across the world to Middle-earth from the Undying Lands.
On Middle-earth, what races are in existence at this time?
Currently, elves and I believe men are waking up at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, and dwarves are waking up. Yeah, so by the time the war starts, there are elves, dwarves, men, but elves are like the primary race in the Silmarillion.
Okay.
And so they declare war on Morgoth. They're fighting back and forth. The elves are almost wiped out. And then I think it's Erendil, goes and appeals to the gods, to the Valar, and says, help us. And even though the elves were like told, don't go after Morgoth, and they did it and betrayed, and even did like killed each other and stuff like that, the Valar come to the rescue and destroy Morgoth's armies, and they find him, drag him out in chains, and they hammer his crown down over his neck into a collar and wrap a chain around it. And then for his crimes, he's tossed through the doors of night into basically nothingness, where he will exist until the last battle.
Okay.
And that is where Morgoth is now. So that's the end of the first age of Middle-earth, of Arda, the first age of Arda. The second age involves the fall of the Númenórean, and then Sauron coming in, who was a disciple of Morgoth and trying to take over Middle-earth, which of course he is defeated by the last alliance of men and elves.
Right.
But the One Ring is not destroyed. It is taken by Isildur.
Right.
And that is the end of
the second age.
Right. The end of the second age. Now, the third age begins with the Valar realizing, whoa, Sauron's not destroyed. People are going to need help. So they send to help them this group called the Astari, which are Maiar, who take the form of old men, who have staves, who can wield magic. And of course, these are the wizards.
So Saruman is also one.
Saruman, there are 2 blue wizards, a brown wizard named Radagast, and then Gandalf. So again, this is my issue with Rings of Power is I don't believe Gandalf was in Middle-earth during the second age. He comes at the beginning of the third age, if I'm 100% correct on that.
Okay.
So, which would be, which I get it. They want to bring in another character, but whatever. Anyways, this is where Gandalf finally arrives in Middle-earth, and he's kind of hailed as like this old man just imparting wisdom to people, walking around as Gandalf the Grey, right? With the staff. They refer to him, I was hoping you'd say this, but they refer to him as like a meddler, right?
Yeah.
He's always messing with things. He's always poking things.
Yeah.
It's like a person who knows what's going to happen, right? And is always kind of moving the marbles around, pushing things this way and that. And that's kind of what he does. But he is known as someone who is imparting wisdom.
Yep.
pretty consistently, right, across different realms, and he has different names, and one of them is Mithrandir, which is what the men call him, and I can't remember what it means. Men and elves call him that, and I can't remember what it meant in Elvish, because again, I don't speak Elvish. I should. Apparently, I'm a terrible Lord of the Rings fan. But so we have this is kind of the background for the character, right? So now, those of you who don't know who Gandalf is, at least you have an idea, and at least who these wizards are, and kind of where they come from, right? So he is, I mean, I don't know if it'd be too far to call him like angelic, right? An angel almost, right?
Yeah.
Come down to kind of help, right? And so at this time, by the way, they have separated. Basically, the earth has been turned into a sphere, and the area of the Undying Lands is separated now, so you cannot sail to it. You'll just reach the other side of Middle Earth. You won't be able to reach the Undying Lands anymore unless they allow you to, which is why the elves are all leaving. They've been pardoned since the end of the First Age, and slowly but surely they've been leaving Middle Earth to its fate in the hands of men and dwarves. And so that's where the story of The Hobbit picks up. For those of you who've read it, Gandalf is probing, with Bilbo and trying to get him to go on this great adventure. Yep. The main goal, though, is not to retake the mountain. What's actually the main goal that Gandalf has in The Hobbit? What is actually the main goal?
Years, I don't remember.
It's okay. Well, who owns the mountain? Who took the mountain from the dwarves? Smaug the dragon, who would be a very dangerous enemy if Sauron ever returns. Smaug the dragon. And so really Gandalf's goal was to eliminate Smaug, so if Sauron returns, he would lose a very great ally, is really the sneaky. And again, you start seeing what Gandalf really is doing behind the scenes. Sure. He's measuring and playing things out and trying to figure things out. And of course, at the same time, they discover the necromancer in Dol Guldur, which turns out to be Sauron. He returns to Mordor, and that kicks off the Lord of the Rings. And for those of you who have not read the books, you should, because they're amazing. But that's kind of where we pick up with this character, with this quote. He's still hanging out with Bilbo. He comes for his 111th birthday. Bilbo leaves the ring behind. And in the book, 17 years passes between when Gandalf leaves and when he returns to tell Frodo that's the One Ring. 17 years. A little different than the movies, by the way.
We started like listening to the audiobook with the boys, and I was like, oh, it's a huge amount of time. Frodo's just sitting there with this ring.
Yep.
Doesn't know what it is, doesn't know. And Gandalf's like, I'll be back. And then Frodo's like, oh, I guess he's never coming back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was interesting.
And so that's actually where we're going to be picking up. So Gandalf, this wise wizard who is basically sent to fight Sauron, to give the people of Middle-earth a fighting chance against Sauron, right?
He's like the Green Berets, right? Like I don't know if you know much about special forces, but one of the things that Green Berets specialize in is going in and helping train like forces and stuff like that. Okay, that's a good example. That's kind of like what he does. He's not actively fighting, right? Like he's not the one who's actively
he does to an extent, but he doesn't usually reveal his full power.
Right.
And there is a reason for that. I think that's interesting that Mike brought that up. It definitely is a softer magic system, but the idea was the Valar kind of imparted to him, obviously, wisdom to understand that you cannot just be wielding your power everywhere all the time. Otherwise, people are going to be worshiping you, and that's going to cause all sorts of problems. Right. So having the wisdom to use your power when you need it.
Sure.
By the way, any thoughts on that? Not using your full power all the time, only wielding what you need when you need it.
I mean, I guess that takes wisdom, right?
Okay.
So
think about our definition. Anything there?
Well, I mean, it fits nicely.
Strength wielded with control.
Yep. Although I will say, like, I will say that wisdom and control are not the same thing. Because I think you can have control and not have wisdom.
Oh yeah.
Right. And you can have vice versa. You can have wisdom and lack control. And so I would say wisdom. If we were to like talk about our definition, wisdom would kind of fall into like a second tier of it, because I think it's something that you need to have. I don't necessarily think that being like that wisdom is masculine, if that makes sense. Yeah, no, I would say wisdom. I would say that men can wield wisdom in a masculine way, and women can wield wisdom in a feminine way. Although I wouldn't even go that far. I would just say that there are situations that wisdom can be wielded within or not. Does that make sense?
I want to come back to that because I want to discuss wisdom as we go along here a little more, but I mean, I think we'll have to look up the definition of wisdom, which is Mike. Is that what you're doing, Mike?
No, but that's definitely in my wheelhouse.
Looking up the definition of wisdom and kind of seeing what the definition would be and how that would apply to masculinity. I think that would be that's actually where we're going with the discussion. But I'd like us to take a look at the quote first that I have for you guys.
Sure.
So Gandalf has come back after he's researching into this ring. It's taken 17 years. He and Aragorn have been looking for a creature named Gollum. They finally find him, and they learn from Gollum about the ring and how Bilbo took it. They also learn that he has been imprisoned in Mordor for I forgot how long, like a year or two or something like that. And he's been tortured, and he revealed to Sauron that a Baggins from the Shire took the ring. So now they know that Sauron knows where the ring is as well. And so he's just finished telling Frodo about this. Like, dude, this is the one ring, the ring of power. He tells him the whole story, how it's lost. And Frodo is like panicking.
This is the scene where he chucks it in the fire and they pulls it out. And he's like, feel it. And he's like, oh, it's cold to the touch. And that whole thing.
And so this quote I'm going to read you is in the movie, but it doesn't take place at this point in the book.
Sure.
In the movie, it takes place when they are in the Mines of Moria, and he and Frodo are sitting in the dark. They're trying to figure out where to go, and he's talking to him. So I wanted to read this quote to you guys real quick, and then I want to talk about sort of what aspects of masculinity are we seeing, and then I want to talk about that word you've been bringing up a lot, wisdom. So let's go ahead and jump in here. "But this is terrible," cried Frodo. "Far worse than the worst that I could imagine from your hints and warnings. Oh, Gandalf, best of friends, what am I to do? For now I am really afraid. What am I to do? What a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had the chance. Pity. It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil, and escaped in the end because he began his ownership of the ring with pity." "I'm sorry," said Frodo, "but I am frightened, and I do not feel any pity for Gollum." "You have not seen him," Gandalf broke in. "No, and I do not want to," said Frodo. "I cannot understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves have let him live on after all those horrible deeds? Now, at any rate, he is as bad as an orc, and just an enemy. He deserves death." "Deserves it? Why, I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends." I'm going to stop there. I think there's more. If you want to hear more, you should definitely read the book. First thoughts on that quote in relationship perhaps to masculinity. Is there anything?
I think the first thing that strikes me is the idea of you clearly see that Gandalf's response is centered around the idea of it's the pity of Bilbo that actually is the best quality of that whole interaction, and why that's why Bilbo ended up not being like completely corrupted by the ring. Like it's the pity part, and he points that out immediately, and that's, to me, like there's a lot in there, right? But to me, like, that's part of the point. He's like, look, man, like, you are showing no pity, no mercy, no kindness, no understanding for a creature who you don't understand. Right? And it would be more convenient for you for that creature to not be alive, and you're seeing what you are seeing as a bad judgment was actually good judgment.
Yeah. And how does Smeagol come in possession of the ring? What is his act?
So exactly. It's exact opposite, right?
Opposite.
So right. Yeah. So Smeagol kills his friend.
Yes, he does.
Right. And so it's the antithesis of Smeagol's action. It's Bilbo had the opportunity to end Smeagol.
And chose not to.
Right.
Which is, like, Can we talk about Bilbo there for just a second too?
Sure.
Like we oftentimes think of masculinity and we think of the toughness and we think like that's the stereotype, right? The warrior.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the man who stays his blade when he doesn't need to strike?
Yeah.
Isn't that a masculine quality? Mercy?
Well, I think if we're talking about strength wielded with control, that's 100% what mercy is, because in order to grant mercy, that means you have to have power over somebody or something.
And they have to have deserved the punishment that they're supposed to be getting. Because that's what mercy is it's you're supposed to get a punishment, but you don't.
Mercy's not necessarily punishment. I would say mercy.
No. Mercy's not the punishment. So justice would be the punishment, right?
Sure.
Grace is favor that is undeserved, right? So you haven't earned it.
Sure.
So it's not just.
Right.
But mercy is you deserve this punishment, but I'm not going to give it to you.
I would slightly disagree with that in the sense of
Really?
Yeah, because for instance, with a pet that is dying of cancer, right? You could let them continue living, right? And that pet doesn't necessarily deserve to die of cancer, right? Like they haven't done anything to deserve death by cancer, right? Which can be incredibly painful.
Okay.
Right? So at times the merciful piece, right, is giving them a death that is painless.
Would that be mercy? Well, could you give us the definition of mercy?
Yep, I'm looking.
Could you look that up real quick?
Yeah,
Or would that be more grace?
According to Google's initial search, compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm.
So they deserve the punishment or the
Nope,
harm.
that's not. Nope, that's not what it said.
Oh,
Compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm.
Punish or
I
harm.
can give them forgiveness or compassion. Those are two different things. Neither of which necessarily means that somebody technically did something wrong. Forgiveness leans towards that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it.
Yeah.
And then it just dictates that it is within my power or the subject's power to do harm.
okay.
I would say what you're talking about is more leans towards grace, because grace has the element of I deserved something, like I deserved a punishment, and I'm given grace in that moment. Whereas mercy, I view that more on the compassion side. I think it can apply. I think it can apply, right?
Webster gives a slightly different one, and it does use the word offender.
Interesting.
So pretty much the same definition as the other one, but it says to an offender or to one subject to one's own power.
I was going to say, because that would be the definition I had been using. The other thing is, again, we are Christians. I tend to look at things from a Christian point of view. This idea of justice, right? If God were to be just to us as sinners, we would be punished, right? That is justice. The grace is the unearned, unmerited favor, right? And then mercy is, you deserve this punishment, but I'm not going to give it to you.
Sure.
And instead, he extends us life abundantly, right?
Sure.
That's why, I always view that as justice is what you deserve, right? It's earned, proper punishment or favor.
Sure.
Earned or proper punishment or favor. And then to one side, you have grace, which is like unearned favor. And the other side is like a punishment, but I'm not going to give it to you.
I think,
but I get that would be my explanation, I should say. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
But I just think it's interesting to have these two characters, this dichotomy of one starts with the ring of power out of murder. Yeah. Right. Yep. The desire for that power. The other one obtains the power and then forgoes the murder. Right. And it's like, and actually could kill him. And does Smeagol deserve it? Yes. For everything he's done.
Sure.
Absolutely. But Bilbo doesn't kill it.
Yeah.
It's just like that act of, again, mercy.
Yeah. Well, and I think the key here in this instance, because I would say that this is the reason it's merciful, is not because Bilbo is not in a position of authority over Smeagol.
Yep.
Right. So from a punishment perspective, he doesn't have the authority to punish him. He has the power, though.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Right, and that's really where I come down where I look at mercy is you have the power, right? And when somebody is merciful, they are staying that power for your benefit.
Yeah.
Right. Or because you guys have heard of a merciful death, right?
Oh yeah.
Like that, right? Like there is this aspect of
That is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Right. And that's why I went there versus grace.
Or would it be a graceful death?
No, I'd say it's merciful. Right?
No, I'm just saying based off the offender definition.
Well, and I think again, I don't know. Either way, though, like the point you're making is still there. It's still the same.
Oh yeah,
right?
we're debating semantics right now, but it's still kind of fun. I think it's actually, I was gonna say it's more enjoyable, to kind of dive into those. But yeah, and I love the fact that you brought up again strength wielded with control. We got to talk about that, and that brings me back to that idea of wisdom you were talking about, and you kind of said, well, wisdom isn't. You said wisdom isn't masculine.
I would say, well, let me say it this way. I wouldn't say it's either masculine or feminine. I think it is a tool that can be wielded.
Or is it a virtue?
Or a virtue, for sure. To go along with Aristotle,
and I
right?
don't know if I would describe it like you were saying. I do think it's interesting though, thinking about wisdom applied to masculinity and femininity, understanding the limitations of men and also where we excel.
Yeah.
That's wisdom, right? Because what can you give us the definition of wisdom? Which I looked it up before I came here. Actually, I looked it up a long time ago, but double checked to make sure it was good. But it should be like it's application of knowledge and stuff like that in a certain way. I can't remember. I should have written it down.
Two of them then, because
there was another one. Yeah,
Google does pull its own definitions, and then Webster does its own.
It's kind of interesting.
So Google's definition is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. The quality of being wise, which you should use.
Good judgment. Can you read the second one below it?
Wisdom.
Too?
The quality of being wise.
The quality of being wise.
There should be one right below it too.
Here, I'll get through these and I'll do the Webster one real quick. Too. Similar definition is the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. The body of knowledge and principles that develops within specified society or period.
Yeah, which is kind of an interesting definition.
So then Webster's dictionary definition is the ability to discern inner qualities and relationships, i.e. insight, good sense, so judgment, generally accepted belief, accumulated philosophical or scientific learning, so knowledge. Yeah.
And here's why I would say it's not really either or.
Yeah.
Is because it deals with the way that you apply decision making. Right. That's and decision making in and of its own has nothing to do with masculine or feminine.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that's why I would say wisdom isn't masculine. Right. What I would say, though, is that men should, in order to exercise control, right, of strength, wisdom has to be applied.
There we go. That's what I was hoping. I was going to ask a question about so what?
Hold on. Can you restate that?
Yeah, can you say that again? Because I thought that was a good point.
I would say that in order to maybe the let me say it this way: the best outcome for when you apply strength held under control is through wisdom.
Does that make sense? To use your strength.
So,
and in what amount?
Are you implying then that you need wisdom in order to have control over your strength?
I am not. I am saying the best outcomes come when wisdom is applied in there. It becomes
okay, but somebody can still have control over their strength without being wise.
Yes.
Which is what I said earlier, that you can have control.
I was just making sure I'm hearing.
Yeah. So,
which I think is actually quite brilliant. To be honest, like that, like what you just said, everything you've been saying this whole time, you were already like hitting what I was. I mean, when I was looking through that quote, that was where my mind went, was that idea of control. But I also went to the idea of like, well, is wisdom a masculine? Like we talked about courage and how we associate courage with masculinity, but there's a lot of courage in femininity.
Yep.
Like my wife's given birth to 3 kids, no epidural. That's a lot of toughness and courage there, dude. Especially if you've already been through it once.
Yeah.
And like that, like my wife astounds me, just astounds me. And so that is courageous, right?
Yep.
Like the fact that she steps up as a mom every day, that takes a lot of courage.
Sure.
And so like I started realizing after our discussions how much those virtues can be seen in both femininity and masculinity, or their application, and how they help us better utilize masculinity. And so I love the fact that you said strength under control with wisdom, right? So it's, that idea of wisdom is that understanding and application. It's not just the knowledge, but it's the sound judgment.
Right.
So I can have a lot of strength and I can have it under control, but there may be a time where I need to unleash that strength. But there may be a time where it seems like I need to unleash that strength, but I make the choice not to, and it turns out better. For instance, when there's this little creature in front of me and I could cut its head off because I'm invisible and I got my sword out, but I choose not to. Bilbo, right? Like that's what went to my mind when I was thinking that.
Well, and that's, I would say, what the difference between masculinity and good masculinity is, right? I would say, and I say it that way because I think that there is, or maybe not, maybe not
true masculinity.
No, follow that one out.
Well, because okay, so let me think through this, because I think that you can have a definition of masculinity, right? But I think that in order for it to reach its greatest potential, there are other components that have to come along to essentially amplify it. So wisdom being the, or other virtues that have to come along to amplify that.
So, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
So then I've got one small question, and I'm going to probably avoid the second one.
Why?
It's gonna. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
Is wisdom a requirement to be defined as masculine?
No.
Okay, good. Then the second question is, can you be masculine and not be good?
Yeah, and that's why I paused, because I realized as soon as I said that, I was like, oh, wait. Can you be masculine and not be good?
I think by our definition, no.
Right. And so,
does that make our definition wrong?
I would disagree with that. No. I think the like masculinity should be the ultimate goal and aim of a good man.
Of a good man.
Yes.
You just
masculinity should be the ultimate goal of a good man. So an evil man would still be missing and lacking some aspect of masculinity.
Why?
Because our definition clearly states
I know, but would
true, beautiful, and good.
So you're holding it saying that a bad man cannot be masculine.
Not
because
truly, no.
Our definition. So what I'm doing is I'm challenging our definition.
Yeah.
Is our definition actually
I think our
accurate?
definition is great.
I would say it's probably incomplete, because as we're talking through this, right, I think there is components that maybe have to be teased apart between what do we mean between a good man and a masculine man, right? I think
getting into the discussion of goodness then brings up the discussion is it subjective or objective? I already know what all of our answers would be.
Sure.
However, all of our answers also do not fit everybody's discussion. So could you come up with an argument or a definition that would suit the needs of somebody who thinks that good and bad are subjective?
Well, I would go back to strength, right? So we talked about strength. Is it only physical strength that we're talking about?
Well, no.
We're talking about mental and spiritual strength. Spiritual strength, if you are not religious, if you look at the philosophical idea of spiritual, what would Aristotle and Plato and them say? It's virtue. That is the spirit is virtue.
Yeah.
Which wisdom would be a virtue.
But and
so that fits in there, that if you want to have strength under control, it would require you to be virtuous.
Okay. It's interesting.
Would be what I would say.
Go ahead, Mike. I'll let you go.
So then what is virtuous?
What do you mean, what is a virtue?
No. You said you'd have to be virtuous.
Well, do you want me to list off what the virtues are?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Like, so courage, wisdom, honesty. I mean, you could pull up virtues in action.
Let's just take those three. Could I be those three and still pursue an endeavor that is, in our minds, evil or bad? I could be very honest. I could be very wise. I could be very courageous and still pursue an endeavor that all three of us would find is wicked and evil.
Yeah, I kind of see where you're going with this, because I think that the other piece is then essentially, if we're saying that this is masculinity, I can tell you that I fall short in most of these.
Well, I think that's the idea, though.
Right.
To be honest, is to set a standard that is so high, it's basically we can't reach it, but that would be the ideal.
Honestly, the more I think about it, I think you can have. I think masculinity and goodness and evil are separate. I think you can be masculine, and I think you can be evil. I don't think that goodness would necessarily have to be a requirement of the definition of being masculine. It's kind of similar as when we talk about toxic masculinity. We usually talk on topics on how people are strong, and they're necessarily not using their strength properly, or they actually don't have good mental strength and things of that nature, right? Or they're doing it for the wrong reasons. We're applying our own morality, essentially, into the conversation. We're injecting our own subjective, in their minds, our own objective thoughts into the conversation. So could you be masculine? You can be strong. You can have courage, you can be wise, you can be all these things, all these virtues, and then apply them towards something that we would deem unworthy or evil.
Well, and I think, and maybe that's an important thing that we need to consider, because then it becomes, how do I say this? I guess the way that, as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about it. So George MacDonald, and this will get to a little bit more of like our faith, but George MacDonald said that the only true man was Christ.
And I would agree with that.
Right.
That's why I think our definition was what it was.
And so then the question is every man who's done evil, is he not really a man?
Again, I would separate the term man from masculinity.
Is he not masculine?
I think a man is the person who is pursuing masculinity. I would say, and again, I think that idea of masculinity being the ultimate goal, I would say we all fall short.
Right.
Of it. So no one is truly masculine.
Oh, boy.
Would be my argument, according to the definition we created. But that's why that in service to God part is so important, because otherwise it just becomes, well, I've decided that this is morally right. I'm not going to go off of these moral judgments, whatever it is. And I think that having a higher power is so important.
Yeah, no,
I
although I do think there is a difference between I see
where you're struggling, because there's like the thing is, I think each of us exemplifies different aspects of masculinity.
Sure.
And then I think we're lacking. And again, I'll be honest with you, the approach I've taken to this is the Aristotle approach of pursuing virtue and all this stuff, this idea that and we should definitely read through I believe that's Socrates' dialogue with Meno, where he's breaking down sort of where does virtue even come from?
Sure.
And can it be taught, or is it innate, or is it divine? And Plato comes down to the idea that yes, it's divine. And so each of us are given a different portion of these virtues. And then how do we get better at the other ones? We look to other people who do those well. So for me to pursue masculinity, which would be my goal, I would never reach it, but my goal is to pursue it, right? I would look to men who exemplify those other aspects of masculinity well. So if I'm working on strength, I'm like, well, you know what? I have my spiritual strength. I'm doing pretty well with that, but I'm lacking in the physical strength. I need to look to another man who does that well and try to emulate them.
Sure.
And I think it again, and this is maybe what I've been thinking about over the past couple weeks since we had that milestone discussion. You remember that? We talked about this idea of like, when does a boy become a man? When do you become a man? And I started thinking about this idea of like, you have boyhood, but then you have manhood, right? And manhood is the journey towards masculinity, which is the ultimate destination of a man. Does that make sense? So I could, you're shaking your head, Mike.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense.
So like masculinity is the ultimate destination, the ultimate thing you're trying to work towards as a human being, as a man. Does that make sense? You are trying to have strength, mental, physical, and spiritual, under control, wielding it in service to God, and you're trying to defend the things that are true, beautiful, and good. So you also have to have knowledge of what those things are. So that's what you're pursuing as a man throughout your life, knowing full well we'll never perfectly reach those ideals.
I guess I think for one of the things I'm struggling with,
but again, this is I think I need to push this out here.
Topic
no, this is good because
sorry, I know Tim was
go ahead.
Somewhere.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the way you're describing it is you're describing perfection, not masculinity.
Well, perfect masculinity,
but it's perfection.
Okay, but the goal is to have an ideal to aim for, so we can.
I understand that, but I doing the interviews and talking to people and looking and just thinking through the little bit I know about different cultures and historical characteristics, and essentially what I would be trying to do if I'm trying to relay something to somebody else to follow, lay out a path for them to follow. The pursuit of perfection sounds great.
Yeah.
Yep.
It does not provide a way where most people will typically be able to follow.
Well, and I think that's one of the main reasons of the podcast, right? To try to give
but I mean,
some practical.
So if I'm thinking about being perfect, like, yeah, we can follow Jesus because he's the perfect example, right? However, we are also not expected to be perfect. I don't think that every definition of every characteristic or every virtue means I have to be perfect in it. I think the idea of masculinity means I'm going to have my imperfections. It's what am I striving for, though, and how do I deal with those imperfections that makes me masculine in that adventure, right?
Yeah.
So masculinity would be more of the culmination of like, these are the virtues that I think are more important to a man than a woman, if we're going to separate the two, right?
Yeah.
And this is how I pursue those ones. Knowing full well that I will never be perfect, but the fact that I have not reached perfection is part of being masculine. How I deal with my failures and my faults through this pursuit is a masculine thing in itself. So why would the perfection be part of the definition?
Well, and
I think I just talked in a circle, but do you kind of get where I'm
Oh, no,
thinking?
I understand it.
I think what I'm trying to wrap my brain around, right, is because I think trying to think of a good analogy here.
You're good. I'm just thinking out loud. So I'm not married to any of this. I'm just
guys, like honestly, thank you for staying with us. If you guys have made it this far, and I would say that this in and of itself is wisdom at play, because I'm not saying we're super wise, but like I think it's really important for us to stop and examine and like apply what we're learning and really parse apart some of this stuff, because
and challenge our
absolutely
challenge our initial idea.
Yeah,
that's why we call it a touchstone, not a definition.
Yeah. So when I think about I in my head I parse apart this ideal, but then also like you can still be a man without being the ideal. That's
oh yeah.
And so like that's where I'm trying to get, because it's like if we say that our definition of a man or of being masculine is this, right? Well, I will never be that.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, I'll be honest, like,
it makes you feel like down on yourself.
I'm like, well, what? Like, I don't want to. There's a part of me that's like, man, I'll never get there.
Yeah.
So like there's a little bit of it's a little discouraging. And I think part of one of the things that our society lacks is guys who believe that they're men, guys who believe that they are capable and that they embody some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Not that they aren't on this journey to being like, because I agree with you. We do need to have an ideal that we're going after. I also think though, we need to have a basic understanding
realistic
of like,
expectations.
Yeah. Like, hey, this is what masculinity looks like. This is what perfect masculinity looks like.
And that's why I tend to go towards the perfect one, because again, I like that aim. Right. Sure. But again, my mindset is it actually makes me feel good knowing like, whoa, that's the perfect idea of masculinity. None of us are ever going to reach it. So why should I feel bad if I don't fully ever reach it? It's again, it's almost like. Could you say
that you're not masculine then? Because that's then what you're saying.
And again, that's kind of like where you're saying, well, is he not masculine then? Or is maybe the perfect masculinity versus more.
That's what I'm saying.
Imperfect masculinity.
That's why I'm like the core definition
or do we want to
of
use
masculinity.
A different word, like perfect man. And then masculinity is working towards becoming a better man.
I don't know, because I do think there is this. You need to be able to go, okay, this is masculine, right? This is good masculinity. This is bad masculinity. This is perfect masculinity.
Is there bad masculinity?
Oh shoot, I'm on camera. Crap.
Would you say that?
Because Mike, you've not been on.
Like to be honest, like
I've missed the camera switches on 90% of these, by the way.
That's okay. Like, would you say there's bad masculinity, or is it lacking masculinity?
That's what. Okay, I should give no. Screw that. I'm not on camera at all. I'm just gonna leave it off.
Guys, you got to see Mike.
I'm just curious because we've had
seconds.
a couple comments that talk about like, well, saying toxic masculinity is just semantics, and I would disagree with that, because I think the whole reason why you put toxic in front of masculinity is to drag down masculinity.
I think that's more of a social mechanism, though.
Well, it's like
some guy did a breakdown too when it started getting used in some psychological. Anyway, that's a whole different story. I do think the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think if you're looking for application in a definition, the fact that we can add on words like perfect masculinity or good masculinity,
why isn't
dictates that the definition, that masculinity itself necessarily does not mean good or bad in itself. It can be used for good or bad. A gun is a gun, does not necessarily mean it's going to be used for bad. It could be used for good, right? And then there's also the idea, hold on, I'm reading something here. The idea that masculinity is a process, not the result.
Okay, so we're approaching And that's where, again, I think determining our definition seems to be the result.
I wonder, okay, so
not the journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
So,
because the initial touchstone definition thing, strength, will with control, in service to God and defense of the true, beautiful, and good, is the result. That's the ultimate result. So do we want to define masculinity as the process to becoming, and that is what our vision of a perfect man is, and then masculinity is the process?
I would argue that it's more acceptable to say like being masculine is the pursuit of those, not necessarily the fulfillment.
I like that. So the pursuit,
which means it is the process.
Okay.
Are we adjusting our touchstones?
We might have to.
Be
we'll have to.
The pursuit of it, because I like that a lot.
Also,
well, and as you guys are talking, I'm wondering if we really need to have a discussion around like, what do we mean when we say being a man?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so I think that, man, oh gosh, this is gonna. My mind's going. Yeah, guys. I apologize. My brain's going a bunch of different directions. But
there's I think it's a Latin word.
Those are fun conversations.
Well, it's almost like we need to have a couple of different components. To this, right? I mean, it's weird. I guess people are not super simple.
So this is where I go back to like, when you asked if I agree with the definition or not, and I was like, I don't necessarily
not so much agree with the definition.
Well, no, back when you're like, this is how we define it. I was like, I can't say that. That was my whole stance. Remember, I made a big stink about it. This right here is why. The whole idea is we're looking for it, and it's the pursuit of it. It's not a definition. I do like the idea that it's a process. We are trying to talk to different men, look at men through history, look at fictional characters of how we've idealized men and what they will do. And we're trying to figure out what are the core things that we are actually looking to from all these different characters.
Yeah.
What are the core things that are being echoed throughout all cultures, throughout all time?
Yeah.
And so, I think a new definition is good. And I also think that's another reason why not calling it a definition, but like, this is our current hypothesis, or our touchstone, whatever it is.
Yeah, I like
this is our current theory. It's a good mindset to have. But that's also like when Tim, you're like, I know, I want to think about this. I'm like, follow the bunny trail. Let's see where it goes. We could be wrong for 20 minutes. It's fine. And then we'll figure out something else.
There's a Latin word. It's either Latin or Greek. I'm pretty sure it's Latin, called aporia, which is like without a path. So basically you come to the end of the path and now you're kind of like, where do I go from here?
Yeah.
And now it's like true jungle. Discovery. Now it's like true exploration into these ideas that we don't fully understand. And so but I love that idea of you calling it the pursuit, because when you're like, well, would you say you're a masculine man? And my initial response is, well, by my definition, no. But at the same time, there's like that idea of, well, were we shooting for perfect masculinity, or is masculinity the journey, right, towards being a perfect man, knowing full well you're not going to reach it? I don't know. I get what you're saying though, and I love the ad of the pursuit, because it seems like you said, it feels so discouraging. But like in my mind, I'm like, no, when you add the pursuit, I'm like, that's what I mean. That's what I'm thinking about.
Another caveat to think about it. In other words, like, not to beat the dead horse on the perfection thing, but you wouldn't know if anyone's perfect at it until they die, which means you could never call anyone masculine until they're all done, right?
Yeah,
you have to look at the snapshot of how it is.
Yeah.
Versus saying the pursuit, you could be then saying, right now, Tim is being a very masculine man. He is striving to be. He's in the pursuit of the thing. Yeah. He's doing the process that would take to be a real man, versus then you look at Mike and you're like, homie is doing nothing. He's just chilling. Like, there's no pursuit. There's no endeavor. There's
and when you say real man, right? Like, I think that's the other component that we're missing,
looking for. Yeah.
Right. Like, I think we want to be able to say this is a real man, right? What a real man does is the pursuit of masculinity, right?
Ooh, I like
and
it.
so I
so
think,
then what is he pursuing? And
right.
Like, that's where I'd argue, like, yeah, we do want to be virtuous. Like, wisdom, ironically, I don't think I'd throw that in there. Like, it's like a bonus, right? Like, you look at it in like D&D stuff, it's a plus 10 to intellect. It's going to help out a lot. But is it necessarily a core attribute or core virtue of masculinity? I don't know, because I can look at women and children and things that are not yet, nothing I would include in masculinity, and they should actually have the same wisdom almost in a lot of situations.
Mike, also side note, if you are going to not be on screen, then we need to get some sort of bright light that comes down in the middle, like some sort of,
I'm gonna get a Morgan Freeman voice modifiers.
Anyway, it just, I appreciate that,
I haven't been moving the cameras at all either, so it's kind of sucking. But no, so that's just my thought is like, I would start to exclude virtue, because all the virtues would definitely apply to our idea of an ideal man, right?
Yeah.
We would want all these things, but it makes it also a lot harder. So like distilling it down to the ones that are the core would be the ones that are specific almost, or absolutely needed for it to be the pursuit of masculinity. And as much as like, I love wisdom, I think it's the best thing you can pursue. Honestly, I really do. I think there could be masculine men that aren't necessarily that wise.
I disagree with you on the wisdom piece.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we need to come up with like, I'm starting to think of virtue as like the foundation for both masculinity and femininity, because you need wisdom to
I
understand
agree with that.
what either of those are. So in order to pursue it, you got to get that knowledge, and again, like you said, the proper judgment in its application. So I put that in the spiritual.
No, I'm just thinking out loud. So I'm going to be argumentative, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. Anyway, I'm being
You're wrong, Mike.
Mike's inner
Mike's
teenager
wrong.
is coming out. He just
why? Okay, so
why,
if you take a
Mom?
teenager, the teenager does not have that wisdom yet. I can send him on that track of pursuing masculinity by teaching him.
Yeah.
Now he will gain wisdom obviously through the process, right? But it is a byproduct of a lot of things. It's not necessarily the requirement of.
Correct.
So if it's not a requirement of, would it technically be in the definition?
I would say it this way. In order to reach perfection, it is required.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, wisdom is not acquired by just reading books, nor is it acquired by just living. Well, or it's not just acquired by living life.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a mixture of all those. And there's other components in there that we can't even fully define or verbalize. Like when you hear people talk about wisdom, because here's the thing, right? Making a wise choice is not just weighing pros and cons. It's not just using your experiences. It's not just using book knowledge, right? There are some aspects of intuition in there that you cannot necessarily teach. Are you following me there?
Do you know what chicken sexing is?
I mean, I can guess.
No, I know this just sounded like a weird, like I just
that sounded.
I mean, no.
Sorry, I'm making this entertaining as heck for me.
Go ahead, Mike. Tell us all about chicken sexing.
So you said there's a level of intuition that is not book knowledge. It's not something you can necessarily teach. Okay, so chicken sexing is the actual act of determining.
Mike, get on camera.
Jeez,
I can't.
Okay, so chicken sexing is a job. It's the act of determining a baby chick's sex. So is it a male or a female chicken? Right. This is very important because they do different things and they're valuable and for different reasons, right?
I still want to make a non-binary
a female
joke right
go for it. A female chicken gives you eggs. You kind of need to know that. So according to a book I read, I can't remember what it was. I think it was Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. He goes into this. And he's talking, and the whole thing is talking about like how your subconscious is doing calculations in your brain and then telling you what to do. And it's like your gut feeling, right? It's intuition. And this is why I'm going on chicken sexing.
Yep.
And so the way they do it is there is no way to determine the chick's sex except to have a previous chicken sexer tell you if you're right or wrong. So what they do is they have you grab a chick and you have to say male or female right off the bat. That's it. This is how you train. And they tell you if you're right or wrong.
Oh, yeah,
That's
I've
it.
heard of this. Okay,
So literally in what they're doing is they are trying to, over repetition and experience, get your intuition to build up, right? On if it's a male or female. So that's a male, that's a female, that's a male, that's a female. Just by, and it's deemed intuition by how we would normally use it.
Sure.
But what it really is, it's knowledge that your brain is calculating these minor things and is determining it. So it knows the feel when it touches it, right? That sounds really dirty. But it does know it. And there is a applicable knowledge that you could pass down then to somebody else. So even intuition is something that eventually you could distill enough to say, this is exactly what is causing you to have that intuition. You are seeing the person react like this. You're seeing a subtle smile on their face.
Sure.
They are happy about what you just said. Hone in on that. Keep doing that, like kind of thing. Like you can teach somebody how to read their own intuitions from actual data. So I think that when you say that wisdom isn't this, I'm like, I think you can.
I think there are components of that in wisdom. The problem is that
trail, by the way.
Wisdom. Okay, but you're not wise because you learned how to do chicken sexing.
No, but wisdom is the application of that knowledge.
Well, yes, but the problem is wisdom is when you are in different circumstances and you don't have all the answers and you don't have previous full understanding of that situation. And you may, right? Like there could be similar situations, but wisdom often comes into play when it's unique situations or and maybe not unique situations, but situations that you can't necessarily train for that, right?
Can you?
I would say that I would say it's different than training, right? Is okay. Hold on a second.
I'm listening. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I brought up earlier. I'll just go with this. Special forces, right? They do lots and lots of training all the time. Tons of different scenarios, tons of different weapons, tons of different targets. All these, different assaults, different tactics. All of these things, right? When communications goes down and you don't have a directive of whether to move in or not, right? It is wisdom in that moment that helps you make that decision. It doesn't make the decision for you, right? Wisdom is the culmination of everything that helps you make a decision. Now, the outcome will determine whether you are actually wise or not.
I like that. The outcome does determine if you're wise.
I'm so glad we settled on wisdom, because that was literally the thing I wanted to pick out and talk about, whether or not that was an aspect of masculinity.
So,
and I think there's more to talk about on that.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that that's what we got to settle on a little bit and actually got to discuss. But I think it's interesting that we settled on that idea of the process of becoming, like the process of pursuing being a perfect man, or whatever the heck you want to call it. But that's like masculinity. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know. I immediately went to, again, I feel like there's more wisdom in that.
Sure. Well, and I don't know. I think Gandalf, just kind of get back on top. And Mike, is there anything else you wanted to add on there?
Oh, no, I like the conversation. I will say, hold on, I'm curious on your thoughts on this then. And one of the definitions of wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment, the quality of being wise. All those things, like in those trainings, a lot of those, I'm not military. Sure. I know in a lot of things I do, they can be taught. Like, okay, if there's actually some sort of threat detection goes off, there's a playbook you can run, and you've been taught on what is the best way to handle a conflict or an interaction of some sort. So I think you can teach a lot of the knowledge and the wisdom and the judgment. You can teach it. I don't know where we were going with that. I think we were like, is that a requirement of being masculine or something of that nature?
Sure.
So I can't remember how we got on this.
Well, I think we were trying to go down, okay, how much of wisdom can you really know or train or teach?
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry. I diverted us on this weird chicken thing.
I don't want to say that wisdom can't be, that there's not teachable components of it.
Yeah.
I would just say that there are aspects of wisdom that we can't fully articulate. I don't even think I did a very good job of articulating what I'm trying to say here.
I do think it is hard because and I would think my example actually wow, I kept saying I think my example would even support that there are different levels of wisdom that are extremely difficult for us to articulate, because the way they trained that position was literally a person picks up a chick and you have to tell them if they're They're not telling them, well, you're feeling a nodule here and that's what it is. They're not giving them a clear definition. They're just telling them. So I do think you're right in that sense, and I'm not even trying to argue. I'm just more just thinking as we're going. I don't know if that aspect's even that important to even focus on, though, is if we can teach it to somebody. I think my main curiosity was, do we think that wisdom is a core requirement of being masculine, or seeking wisdom? Is that necessarily a core requirement of being masculine? I'd have to think about that.
Well, again, that whole idea of when to use your strength and when not to, and how much of it to employ. I think a lot of that comes down to wisdom. Understanding what it means to be true, beautiful, or good. That requires discernment, doesn't it? Which is what a lot of wisdom is that discernment. To be able to discern the difference between good and evil. So I mean, personally, I think if we put the pursuit of strength under control and service, even if we put that in front of it, it still requires wisdom.
Okay.
But again, I don't think that, like you were saying, though, I brought that up for a reason, because I don't think it's just uniquely masculine, because I think femininity would demand that as well.
Do you think it requires wisdom, or do you think it produces wisdom?
I would say requires it before you would.
I think it depends on the personality. I know a lot of
that
people
sounds like a whole nother discussion.
I know a lot of people that can be trained on how to do things.
I don't know if I don't know if we want to get into that right now, but I do kind of want to pull us back into that character of Gandalf and just again that idea of wisdom. But his quote where he says, many who live deserve death, and some who die deserve life.
Yep.
And you give it to them. I love that. I love that quote so much because he follows up with, "Do not be so eager to deal out death and judgment. For even the very wise cannot see all ends." And it's like, it hit me so hard as a kid seeing that in the movie theater. And I distinctly remember that. That's why I picked that quote, because that was the quote that stood out to me in that entire movie. That was the one I took with me out of that, just hearing it and then going back and reading it in the book, as a kid, as a freshman in high school, being like, how judgmental am I towards other people? How often do I pass down judgment on other men? How many times am I like, well, that dude's not very masculine? You know what I mean? Like, how often do I lay judgment down on people? And I'm like, man, like, I'm so quick to deal out death and judgment towards people, but I can't give them life or death. Who am I to sit here and be deciding this stuff? And again, it's just, to me, it brings me back to the whole, that higher power thing of like, man, I'm kind of glad I'm not the judge. It's a good thing because I'd be a terrible judge.
Well, and we've talked about it before. This is where humility also has to come into place, right? Like you can't, I think it goes along the same lines of, the more I learn, the less I know. Yeah. Right. It goes along that same. So I would imagine the wiser you are, the more humility you have because you understand the weight of your decisions, right? Like we often play, armchair quarterback and like, well, if I had been in that situation, I would have done it this way. And it's like, dude, you don't even know, and now that's not to say that we can't, that we completely lack oversight and I maybe even like perspective, right? To speak truth into things, right? I would say there are plenty of times where we can look at some dude doing something. You're like, yeah, that's wrong. Right? Like, hey, dude, you probably shouldn't beat your kid. Like, that's wrong. Yep. Like there are instances of that, but then there are other instances where, it's a tough situation. I watch football, and on Sundays, you're like, dude, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you call a timeout? Why didn't you? Yep. And I say that out loud, right? But at the same time, in the same moment, right? If I stopped and I looked at, well, what would I do in that situation? It's easy when I have no pressure on me. I don't have millions of people watching me. I don't have an entire, personnel of 100+ people that are dependent on what I say, what I do, my play calls. Like there is a lot of high pressure in that situation. And it's interesting because stress, right? Stress has a really negative impact on our ability to think clearly, right? And so that's why, that's why I think you see wisdom and peace being very interrelated, because I think it's so hard to, and honestly, like I would say, oh my gosh, who's the actor who portrayed Ian McKellen did an amazing job capturing Gandalf, because no matter what, I mean, even maybe the fly, you fools, was probably the most, I would say, stressed.
No, when he yells at Peregrine Took,
that's
all the time.
True. That's true.
Which is like my favorite. You have this wise guy, and even he gets ticked off at like the childish antics of these hobbits.
But he honestly, like the delivery with which he presents Gandalf is just, it's this character that is peaceful, is at peace. He is, and I think wisdom and peace are very interrelated.
So I think it's so interesting you said that, because I think that's a perfect spot to end, because Gandalf the Grey passes away. He returns as Gandalf the White. And in the book, they describe, and they show it a little bit in the movie, not as much, but in the book, everywhere he goes during the Battle of Minas Tirith, when, these hordes of orcs are trying to pour over the wall, and Grod, this giant hammer, is coming against the gates, and, the Nazgul are flying around. Everywhere he goes, the hearts of men, their spirits are lifted. Just by his very presence. And I think that's such a cool thing. Again, just a wonderful character to study when you look at it from the point of view. Yeah. And we didn't even get to talk about the fact that he was also a warrior and a scholar. He pursued knowledge, right? And like all these aspects that I think easily, this guy is masculine, right? Like we talk about that. Yeah. He absolutely demonstrates, no matter what definition we're using, we could absolutely say Gandalf represents masculinity. Yep. But we look at those different aspects of it and we say, well, why can't I be wise as a man? Why can't I sit here and be knowledgeable and be scholarly and pursue those things, or show pity and mercy?
Yep.
I love that, like that line where he was like, it's pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Almost like that's what saved him, was that pity.
Yeah.
The fact that he pitied this poor, wretched creature, this horrible thing.
Yep.
And it just makes me look around the world and think these people, the people that I judge harshly, or, think to myself like, wow, in this instance, am I like Bilbo or am I like Frodo?
Yep.
And it's like, and if I was a little more like Gandalf, maybe I'd make the right decision a little more often.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that.
Man, well, any final thoughts? Mike, anything about chickens you want to add? Maybe some pigs in there? We get the whole farm going on here?
You should eat more chicken.
Oh, dude, I eat a lot of chicken.
Yeah.
Plenty of Chick-fil-A,
Was that a
buddy.
Chick-fil-A?
Yeah.
Can we get sponsored by Chick-fil-A? Good Lord, dude. I'd be totally down with that.
I think if anyone ever paid us anything for our content, I think I'd be shocked at this point.
Wow. Way to bolster our...
No, I mean like sponsorships. I mean, we're not really like
listen,
at that point
I can
yet.
dream of a Chick-fil-A sponsorship, okay, Mike?
I'll try to open up a Chick-fil-A just for you, Matt. And
Let's
then
do
we'll,
it.
Like,
Let's do
we'll
it.
go that route. And then,
Any final thoughts, Tim?
Well, I think this is just another great example of it's really important for us to pay attention to the characters that we're hearing.
Yeah.
Right? Like the people that we listen to the stories of, they carry value, and it's really important for us to consider that.
Absolutely.
It's really important for us to consider how do I apply that in my own life, right? Like, what does it mean for me to be like Gandalf, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to be Gandalf. I mean, that'd be
Not gonna
pretty
be fighting
sweet.
a Balrog.
I've tried to grow my beard long. It just doesn't do well.
I can't handle it
do
either.
it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
I don't have the patience. I don't have the, but all that being said, like, I love that we discuss this, because I think there are many times we equate masculinity and power and even like, strength under control. It's like, oh, I could have punched him in the face, but I didn't, or could have said this thing, but I didn't. And using that component of wisdom and how that plays out in people's lives, not just like in the immediate, but like long term. And I think that interaction with Frodo really kind of captures that. So I liked
so
it.
too.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah. I think my final thought is I love the fact that we can dive into a fictional character and talk about wisdom, and then we totally we go on all these different journeys and come right back to this masculinity and all that. And I love the fact that we've even adjusted our touchstone tonight. Like, this is the first time we've really decided to kind of like adjust it. I think that's a good adjustment. The idea of the pursuit of strength under control, in service to God and in defense of the true, beautiful good. I think that's a great addition. Again, I don't know if it's a perfect definition or not yet, but I think it's a great place to.
I mean, it's like our second draft, so it's probably not perfect. I'm gonna go there.
Don't even go. I'm an author. I hate editing so much. I'm like, why can't it all just come out perfect? Like,
That'd be amazing.
Dude, I could get so many books done. Oh my gosh, I have like 46 planned. I've only written like 5, and I've only published like 3.
Oh man, that's fun.
Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Beard.
Guys.
We had a great time discussing Gandalf and wisdom and just kind of diving into things. Again, hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you got something out of this. Those of you out there who are men who are watching this, leave some comments. Let us know what you think about our definition of masculinity and where we're going with it. What would you add to it? What would you take away? What do you think we're missing? What do you think about this idea of masculinity, and how can we be better men? Anyways, thanks again for joining us on Beyond the Beard, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Journey well.
When this silent, you'll be alone, far from friends in life. You'll spend your evenings getting stoned.